I'm Rachel Wilson, 34, a colonel in the Air Force. When I walked into my sister Diana's wedding reception in full military dress, for stars gleaming on my uniform, the entire room froze. After being deliberately erased from the invitation list, seeing their shocked faces was worth it. My parents had rejected my military career for years, favoring Diana, who followed their blueprint. But what they didn't know was that her fiancé, Justin, that defense contractor VP they adored, had secrets. And I brought evidence that would change everything. Before I continue my story, I want to know where you're watching from today. This family betrayal changed my life forever, and if you've ever felt excluded by those who should love you most, you'll understand why I couldn't stay silent. Hit that like button if you've ever had to stand up to your family, and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength when blood ties aren't enough. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, my sister Diana and I were raised with silver spoons in our mouths. The Wilson name meant something in the business community. Our sprawling home in West Hills overlooked the city, and our parents Margaret and Frank Wilson made sure we understood our place in society from an early age. The Wilson daughters will continue our legacy, my father would say at dinner parties, his hand firmly on Diana's shoulder while I sat quietly across the table. Diana was 2 years younger, but somehow always seemed to be the primary focus. She was gentle, agreeable, and most importantly to my parents, compliant. From an early age, our paths diverged. While Diana showed interest in business and social connections, I was drawn to service and structure. In high school, I joined ROTC, while Diana headed the Future Business Leaders Club. My mother would wrinkle her nose whenever I came home in uniform. "Rachel, darling, military service is so common," she'd say, lips pursed around the word common as though it tasted bitter. The Wilsons have never been soldiers. We employ people. We don't serve others. The disconnect grew when I announced my plans to attend the Air Force Academy after graduation. The dinner that night was frigid. "This family has connections to Ivy League schools," my father reminded me, knife cutting precisely through a steak. "Your grandfather sits on boards. We donate buildings. And you want to throw it all away to become what? A glorified government employee?" Diana, 16 then, watched silently from across the table, eyes darting between us. Even then, she knew better than to side with me. I enlisted anyway, and the day I left for basic training, only my Aunt Elaine came to see me off. My mother claimed a migraine, my father had urgent business, and Diana sent a text wishing me luck but saying she couldn't upset our parents by coming. Over the years, as I rose through the ranks, our family dinners during my rare visits home became increasingly strained. My achievements were minimized or ignored entirely. When I was deployed, my parents told their friends I was away on government business, never specifying military service. Diana, meanwhile, joined our father's investment firm after graduating from Wharton. She became the daughter they showcased at charity galas and country club events. She dated men they approved of, sons of business partners, Harvard graduates, future politicians. The divide became a chasm when I moved into intelligence work. My specialized knowledge sometimes put me at odds with the defense contractors my father's firm invested in. At one holiday dinner, when I questioned the ethics of a particular weapons manufacturer that had recently faced scrutiny for selling to embargoed countries, my father slammed his fist on the table. "You've been brainwashed by government propaganda," he shouted. "These companies protect American interests." What he didn't say, but what I later discovered, was that his firm had significant holdings in that very company. Our last big fight happened 2 years ago, when I was promoted to colonel. I'd called to share the news, and my mother had sighed heavily into the phone. "Rachel, dear, when are you going to leave this phase behind and come join the real world? Diana is being considered for partner at your father's firm. She just bought that lovely condo in Pearl District. Meanwhile, you're still playing soldier." "I'm not playing anything, Mother. I've dedicated my life to this country." "Yes, well, dedication doesn't secure your future, does it? What man would want to marry a woman who's never home? Who puts herself in danger? Diana has been seeing Justin Prescott, you remember, the VP at Meridian Defense? Now, there's a man with a future. That was the last real conversation we had. After that, communication dwindled to obligatory birthday texts and the occasional holiday card. I kept tabs on my family through Aunt Elaine, my mother's sister, who had similarly been cast as the family disappointment for becoming a professor instead of a socialite. She told me when Diana and Justin got engaged last spring, though I received no call from my sister. Through my work, I knew about Meridian Defense. They were a mid-sized contractor that had expanded rapidly in recent years, securing surprisingly large government contracts despite some questionable project deliveries. Nothing concrete enough to trigger an investigation, but enough to raise eyebrows among those of us monitoring defense spending. Justin Prescott had risen quickly through their ranks, from project manager to VP in just 3 years. His specialty was client relations, which often meant whining and dining government officials who approved contracts. I'd seen his name on guest lists for embassy functions and military contractor events. What my family couldn't know, was that in my position, I had access to intelligence briefings that sometimes included concerns about certain defense contractors. And Meridian's name had started appearing with troubling frequency in relation to weapons that somehow ended up in conflict zones where U.S. companies were prohibited from selling. Diana's engagement to Justin created a new complexity in my already strained family relationships. I considered reaching out directly to warn her, but hesitated. Without concrete evidence, it would just sound like jealousy or more family politics. And Diana had made her allegiance clear years ago when she chose our parents' approval over our sisterhood. So I stayed silent, watching from afar as my sister prepared to marry a man whose company might be under investigation, while my family continued to pretend their military daughter didn't exist. I learned about Diana's wedding date from my cousin Tyler, not from my sister or parents. We'd stayed in touch over the years, Tyler being one of the few family members who respected my career choice. "I thought you knew," he said, confusion evident in his voice during our phone call. "It's next month at the Fairmont Hotel. Pretty much the entire extended family is invited." My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard anything about it. There was an awkward pause.
"Rachel, I'm sorry."
I assumed. She's your sister. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment staring at my phone, debating whether to call Diana directly. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year, but surely a wedding warranted breaking the silence. I finally pressed dial, half expecting to reach voicemail, but she answered on the third ring. "Rachel? Is everything okay?" Her voice carried that familiar note of wariness, as though my calls only ever brought bad news. "I heard you're getting married next month," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Another pause. "Yes, to Justin. I thought Mom might have mentioned it. Mom and I don't exactly have regular chats," I reminded her. "Why didn't you tell me?" Diana sighed. "We didn't think you'd want to come. You're always so busy, and you and Dad can't be in the same room without arguing, and Justin's work is, well, you've made your opinions about defense contractors pretty clear." "I'm still your sister," I said quietly. "I know, but..." Her voice trailed off. "It's complicated, Rachel. The guest list was mostly Mom and Dad's business associates and Justin's colleagues. It's practically a networking event with a wedding attached." Something in her tone struck me, a hint of resignation that seemed out of place for a bride describing her wedding. "Are you happy, Diana? With all of this?" "Of course I am," she replied too quickly. "Justin is perfect. Dad thinks he's headed for COO within 5 years. Note that she described what our father thought of him, not her own feelings. I tried once more. "Could we get coffee before the wedding? Just the two of us." "I'm swamped with planning," she deflected. "Maybe after we get back from our honeymoon in Bali." I recognized the brush off, but pushed anyway. "Diana, I'd really like to be there for your wedding. I can request leave." "It's not a good idea," she cut in, her voice suddenly firm. "Dad would. It would just create tension on what's supposed to be a happy day. You understand, right?"
I didn't understand.
"Not really, but I recognized defeat when I saw it. After that call, I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the sting of exclusion. It was during a routine intelligence briefing the following week that Meridian Defense appeared on our radar again. New information suggested they might be using shell companies to move restricted weapons technology to non-allied nations. Justin's name appeared in several reports as the executive overseeing these special projects. The evidence wasn't conclusive, but it was concerning enough that a preliminary investigation had been opened. I found myself in an impossible ethical dilemma, my professional duty potentially pitted against my sister's future happiness. I debated whether to try reaching Diana again with this new information, but what could I really say? Hey, your fiancé might be involved in illegal arms deals, but I can't show you the classified evidence. She dismissed it as my attempt to sabotage her relationship with a man our parents adored. 3 weeks before the wedding, Diana called me unexpectedly. I tried, Rachel, she said, her voice small and defeated. I told them I wanted to invite you. I said it wasn't right to exclude you. What happened? I asked, though I already knew. Dad said he'd pull funding for the wedding if I insisted. He said you'd just cause a scene and embarrass the family in front of important business connections. Mom said. Her voice caught. Mom said choosing you over them would have consequences for my future at the firm. I closed my eyes, absorbing the hurt while simultaneously recognizing the manipulation. And what did Justin say about all this?
Her pause told me everything.
He thinks it's best to keep the peace.
Of course he did.
A man involved in questionable defense deals wouldn't want a military intelligence officer at his wedding, particularly one with a reputation for ethical stands.
I'm sorry, Rachel, Tiana whispered.
I'm not strong like you. I never have been. After we hung up, I made a decision. Diana might not have been strong enough to stand up to our parents, but I was. And if my sister was about to marry a man involved in illegal activities our parents might even be complicit in through their investments, I couldn't simply stand aside. I contacted a trusted colleague in the Justice Department who confirmed that Meridian Defense was indeed under active investigation, with Justin Prescott as a person of interest. The wedding wasn't just a family event. It was potentially the merging of two entities involved in illegal weapons sales. I needed more information before I could act. Using my security clearance, I began pulling together everything we had on Meridian, Justin, and any potential connections to my father's investment firm. What I found made me feel physically ill. There were email exchanges between Justin and my father dating back 3 years, long before he began dating Diana. They discussed market opportunities in regions where U.S. companies were prohibited from selling weapons technology. My father had been introducing Justin to foreign investors with questionable backgrounds. The picture became devastatingly clear. Diana wasn't marrying Justin because of a romantic connection. She was being used as the linchpin in a business alliance. Whether she knew it or not, my sister was being offered as a corporate asset. That night, I called Anna Lane and told her everything I could without breaching classified information. I've always known your father was ruthless in business, she said after a long silence, but using Diana this way, this is beyond the pale, even for him. I need to stop this wedding, I said. You know they'll never listen to you, she warned. Frank and Margaret have spent years discrediting you within the family. If you show up making accusations, you'll be dismissed as the jealous sister. Then I need irrefutable evidence. And I need to show up in a way they can't ignore. That's when my plan began to take shape. I would attend the wedding not as the uninvited black sheep daughter, but as Colonel Rachel Wilson, with all the authority my position commanded. I would wear my full dress uniform with decorations that even my status-obsessed parents couldn't dismiss. And I would bring enough evidence to give Diana a choice about the future she was walking into. With 3 weeks until the wedding, I initiated a careful investigation into my family's business dealings, walking a fine line between my personal concern and professional responsibilities. I called in favors from colleagues who could access financial records without raising flags. What began as suspicion about Justin Prescott's activities quickly evolved into something far more disturbing. Wilson Investments, my father's firm, had been quietly acquiring significant stakes in several defense contractors, including Meridian, over the past 5 years. On the surface, These appeared to be standard investments, but the pattern that emerged through subsidiary companies and offshore accounts told a different story. My father had created an elaborate structure of shell companies that obscured the true ownership of certain defense technologies. These technologies would be sold to his shell companies, which would then license them to foreign entities in countries under various export restrictions. Meridian Defense, with Justin as point man, facilitated these transfers while maintaining plausible deniability. The operation was sophisticated enough that it had evaded detection for years. The only reason it had come to light now was because one particular weapon system had been identified in a conflict zone where it absolutely should not have been. I found myself in my apartment surrounded by documents, building a timeline of my father's corruption. Photos of Justin at meetings with foreign officials were pinned to my wall. Bank transfers, corporate registrations, travel records. The evidence was overwhelming once assembled. But the most heartbreaking discovery came when I found Diana's name appearing in corporate filings from 2 years ago, before she had even met Justin. She was listed as a director of one of the shell companies, though I doubted she understood what she had signed. My father had been laying groundwork, using his own daughter's identity to further his schemes. I called Captain Harry Martinez, an old friend now working with the federal prosecutor's office specializing in arms export violations. "How certain are you about this information?" she asked after I explained what I'd found. "Certain enough that I'm willing to potentially destroy my relationship with my family," I replied. She was silent for a moment. "You know this is bigger than just your sister's wedding, right? If we're saying is accurate, this could involve violations of the Arms Export Control Act, international sanctions, and potentially even the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act." "I know." My voice was steady despite the churning in my stomach. "But I need to give my sister a chance to understand what she's walking into. She may be unknowingly implicated in this." "What exactly are you asking for, Rachel?" "Time," I said. "Don't move on this until after I've spoken with Diana at the wedding. She deserves to hear it from me first, not from federal agents showing up at her door." Harriet agreed to coordinate with the investigation team to delay any overt action until after the wedding date, but warned me that if there was any indication that evidence was being destroyed or that key figures were planning to flee, they would move immediately. As the wedding approached, I experienced some of the worst nightmares of my life, worse than during my deployments. I dreamed of Diana in a wedding dress splattered with blood money, of my father laughing as he sold weapons to shadowy figures, of my mother adjusting Diana's veil while whispering, "Just sign here, darling." I woke each morning exhausted and increasingly certain that I was doing the right thing, no matter how painful. My sister was being used as a pawn in a dangerous game, one that could end with her facing criminal charges alongside our parents and her new husband. 2 days before the wedding, I received a text from Anna Lane. "Your mother called to remind me not to mention you at the wedding. Said it would upset Diana. I'm officially disgusted with my sister." I texted back, "I'll be there anyway. Will you help me if things get chaotic?" Her response was immediate. "Count on it. Your parents forgot I still have Wilson blood too. And unlike them, I remember what it's supposed to stand for." The night before the wedding, I laid out my dress uniform, making sure every medal and commendation was perfectly placed. I had earned each one honestly, through service and sacrifice, concepts my parents had never understood or valued. Tomorrow, they wouldn't be able to dismiss me or my achievements. The 4 stars on my uniform represented not just my rank, but a moral authority they couldn't deny. I prepared a secure folder with copies of the most damning evidence. Nothing classified, but enough to make the situation clear to Diana. I included contact information for attorneys specializing in unwitting participation in financial crimes. I needed her to understand that I wasn't just trying to ruin her wedding, I was trying to save her future. As I finally drifted to sleep, I thought about Diana as she was when we were children, before our parents' expectations had driven us apart. She'd been kind and thoughtful, always making sure I was included in games and activities. Somewhere beneath the perfect daughter persona they'd forced her to adopt, I hoped that person still existed. Someone who could recognize truth when confronted with it, even if it came from the sister she'd been taught to discount. Tomorrow would determine whether I still had a sister, or whether our family's corruption had destroyed that bond forever. The Fairmont Hotel in downtown Portland was decked out in extravagant floral arrangements, with white roses and orchids cascading from every surface. Security guards in dark suits stood at each entrance, checking invitations against a guest list. I watched from across the street for several minutes, observing the arrival of Portland's business elite in luxury vehicles. I had chosen to arrive during the reception rather than the ceremony. My goal wasn't to create a scene during their vows. That would only cast me as the villain in Diana's memory. Instead, I timed my entrance for when my father would likely be giving his toast, when all attention would be on the Wilson family narrative. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my uniform one last time and crossed the street with a confident stride that 15 years of military service had ingrained in me. The first security guard noticed me approaching and stepped forward, hand raised. "Invitation, ma'am?" "I don't have one," I said calmly. "I'm Colonel Rachel Wilson, United States Air Force. The bride is my sister." He frowned, consulting his tablet. "I'm sorry, but there's no Rachel Wilson on the approved list. I can't let you in without authorization." I maintained steady eye contact. "I understand you're doing your job. I'm going to show you my military ID, and then I'd like you to call your supervisor." Something in my tone must have conveyed that this wasn't a typical wedding crasher situation. After examining my identification and making a quick call, he was joined by an older man in a more expensive suit, the hotel's event manager, judging by his demeanor. "Colonel Wilson, I understand there's some confusion about the guest list," he began diplomatically. "There's no confusion," I replied. "I wasn't invited. But I have urgent family business that cannot wait, concerning the legal and financial well-being of my sister." I could see him weighing his options, the potential disruption against the possibility that I was telling the truth about a serious matter. "I assure you, I'm not here to cause a scene," I added. "But what I need to discuss with my sister and her new husband is of critical importance." After a moment's consideration, he nodded to the security guard. "Escort Colonel Wilson to the grand ballroom entrance. Jeremy, alert Mr. Preston that we have a situation." As we walked through the opulent lobby, I could feel eyes turning to take in my uniform. Military dress at social functions wasn't uncommon in Portland, but the formal blue uniform of an Air Force colonel with full decorations commanded attention. We reached the ballroom just as applause was dying down. Through the partially open doors, I could see my father standing, champagne glass raised, his silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. And so, as Diana embarks on this new chapter, joining not just with a man we admire, but with a family of business associates we've respected for years, I'm reminded of what truly matters in life: loyalty, commitment, and family values. The irony was almost too perfect. I nodded to the security guard. "Thank you. I can take it from here." Before he could object, I pushed the doors open fully and stepped into the ballroom. The effect was immediate and electric. Conversations halted mid-sentence as heads turned toward the entrance. My father froze, champagne glass suspended in air, his practiced smile faltering. My mother, seated at the head table in an expensive lavender dress, visibly paled. Diana, radiant in her white gown, turned to follow everyone's gaze. Her eyes widened as she registered my presence, her expression cycling rapidly through shock, confusion, and something that looked surprisingly like relief. Justin, seated beside her in a custom tuxedo, recognized me immediately. I'd never met him in person, but he'd seen my photo in intelligence briefings about his company's activities. The blood drained from his face as he realized who exactly had just walked into his wedding reception. I moved forward with measured steps, the sounds of my dress shoes on marble creating the only noise in the stunned silence. As I approached the head table, my father recovered enough to set down his glass and step forward, attempting to intercept me. "Rachel," he hissed, his public smile now a grimace. "What do you think you're doing?" "Hello, father," I replied, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Congratulations on your daughter's wedding. I'm sorry, I didn't receive an invitation." My mother rose from her seat, social training kicking in as she tried to salvage the situation. Rachel, darling, what a surprise. We thought you were deployed, didn't we, Frank? Her laugh was brittle as crystal. Before my father could respond, Diana stood and moved around the table, ignoring Justin's hand reaching to stop her. To everyone's surprise, especially mine, she embraced me tightly. You came, she whispered against my shoulder. When she pulled back, I could see tears in her eyes, though whether from emotion or embarrassment wasn't clear. Behind her, Justin was now standing, his expression calculating as he assessed the threat I represented. Diana, sweetheart, he called, voice honeyed but eyes hard. Why don't you introduce your sister to everyone? Such a unexpected pleasure to have military presence at our celebration. My father cut in. This isn't the time or place for family reunions. Rachel, I think it would be best if we spoke privately. I finished for him. I agree completely. Diana, Justin, mother, father, perhaps we could find a quiet room for a few minutes? The guests were now openly staring, the whispers starting to circulate. My father looked around, acutely aware of the business associates witnessing this disruption. 5 minutes, he conceded through clenched teeth. In the library room. Then you'll leave. Diana still stood close to me, seemingly reluctant to return to her place at the table. I want Anna Lane to join us, she said suddenly. My mother started to object, but Diana cut her off with unexpected firmness. It's my wedding day. If we're having a family meeting, I want Anna Lane there. From the corner of the room, Anna Lane was already making her way toward us, determination in every step of her sensible heels. As our small group moved toward the exit, my father signaled to the band, which immediately started playing to fill the awkward silence. Justin plastered on a charming smile for the guests, putting his arm possessively around Diana's waist as we walked. Just what do you think you're doing? He murmured to me, smile still fixed in place. This is a private celebration. Yes, I agreed quietly. Private celebrations are exactly your specialty, aren't they, Mr. Prescott? Private celebrations with foreign military officials in countries under arms embargoes. His step faltered almost imperceptibly, but he recovered quickly. I have no idea what you're talking about, Colonel. But bringing your work conspiracy theories to your sister's wedding is a new low, even for the family outcast. We reached the library room, a wood-paneled space with leather chairs and bookshelves that had probably never been opened. As the door closed behind us, shutting out the music and chatter, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father turned on me, facade of civility evaporating. You have exactly 1 minute to explain yourself before I have security remove you. How dare you show up uninvited and create a spectacle? I stood my ground, meeting his gaze without flinching. I think you know exactly why I'm here. The question is whether Diana knows what she's really part of. Wait, I know this part gets intense, but I have to pause for a moment. If you're feeling that tension right now as my family confrontation reaches its peak, hit that like button. Trust me, what happened next in that library room changed everything, not just for me, but for Diana too. The truth was about to come crashing down on all of us. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any part of how this family revenge story unfolds. Now, let's continue with what happened when the doors closed. The library door clicked shut, sealing us into a tense silence broken only by the muffled sounds of the reception continuing without its hosts. My father positioned himself in front of an ornate desk, attempting to command the room as he would a board meeting. My mother stood beside him, her perfectly manicured hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. Diana hovered near the center of the room, Justin's hand still firmly on her waist. Aunt Elaine moved to stand slightly behind me, a quiet show of solidarity. This behavior is completely unacceptable, my father began, his voice low but vibrating with anger. You've always been selfish, Rachel, but disrupting your sister's wedding crosses a line even for you. I unclasped the secure folder I'd brought and placed it on the desk. Before you continue, I think you should see what I've brought. More of your military paranoia? My mother scoffed. Frank, we should call security now. Just look. I said, opening the folder and spreading out the first set of documents. These are corporate filings for shell companies established under Wilson Investments' umbrella. Companies that exist solely to circumvent arms export restrictions. Justin stepped forward, trying to appear casual as he glanced at the papers. What is this supposed to be? Some kind of joke? These, I continued, laying out another set of documents, are financial transfers between those shell companies and certain officials in restricted countries. And these, I added, placing down surveillance photos, are you, Justin, meeting with those same officials in Geneva, Singapore, and Dubai. Diana moved closer, her wedding dress rustling as she peered at the evidence. I don't understand. What does this have to do with our wedding? Diana, honey, your sister is clearly jealous of your happiness, my mother interjected quickly. She's fabricated this nonsense to try to ruin your special day. I turned to my sister directly. Diana, Meridian Defense, Justin's company, has been selling restricted weapons technology to embargoed nations. Our father's investment firm has been facilitating these deals through shell corporations. And most disturbing of all, they've been using your name and identity on some of these corporate filings without your knowledge. Diana's face paled.
What?
That's not possible. I would know if. Remember those documents Dad had you sign when you joined the firm? I asked gently. The routine paperwork for your director position? Did you ever actually read what you were signing? The flash of uncertainty in her eyes told me everything. This is absurd, my father growled. You come in here with some paperwork you've cobbled together from your government conspiracy theories. I pulled out my phone and pressed play on a recording. My father's voice filled the room. Justin, the Kuwaiti intermediary is in place. Once the tech transfers through their subsidiary, we'll have complete deniability. The Wilson-Prescott connection provides perfect cover, business and family united. No one will look too closely at wedding-related transfers. My father lunged for the phone, but I stepped back, stopping the recording. I have 2 hours of similar conversations. Would you like me to play the one where you discuss using Diana's signature without her knowledge? Or perhaps the one where you laugh about how she'll be the perfect shield because she's too trusting to ask questions. Diana's face crumpled as the truth sank in. She turned to Justin, her voice barely audible. Did you only propose to me because of some business arrangement? Justin's charming facade slipped. Diana, don't be ridiculous. Of course I love you. Your sister is twisting things. When did we meet, Justin? Diana asked suddenly. Tell me exactly how we met. He blinked, caught off guard by the specific question. At the charity gala for children's hospitals. You were wearing a blue dress. It was green, Diana said quietly. And it wasn't a children's hospital fundraiser. It was for literacy programs. She turned back to me, tears now streaming down her face. How long has this been going on? The relationship between Justin and Dad? At least 3 years, I answered honestly. Before you two ever met. My mother stepped forward, attempting to take Diana's hands, but my sister pulled away. Darling, you're overreacting. Business and personal relationships often overlap in our circles. It doesn't mean Justin doesn't care for you. Stop it, Margaret, Aunt Elaine interjected, her voice sharp. Stop manipulating her. For once in your life, let your daughter see the truth. Diana looked back at the documents on the desk, then at the wedding ring newly placed on her finger. All those business dinners where you two would talk for hours while I sat there smiling. You weren't including me in the family business. You were using me as cover. Justin's demeanor changed, desperation entering his voice. Diana, baby, let's not do this here. We can discuss this privately on our honeymoon. There isn't going to be a honeymoon, I cut in. Federal agents are preparing to move on Meridian Defense and Wilson Investments. I've only delayed them by coming to you first. The color drained from both my father's and Justin's faces. You've done what? My father whispered, genuine fear replacing anger. I've reported what I found, as was my duty. I replied evenly. The only reason arrests haven't already been made is because I convinced them to let me warn Diana first. She deserves to know what she's been dragged into. Justin suddenly bolted for the door, but Aunt Elaine moved surprisingly quickly, blocking his path. "Running looks like an admission of guilt, young man," she said coldly. He spun back toward us, panic now evident in his eyes. "Diana, you have to believe me. I never meant for you to be involved. Your father assured me you'd be protected no matter what." "Protected?" Diana repeated, incredulous. "You were willing to let me unknowingly participate in illegal activities that could send me to prison, and you call that protection?" My father attempted to regain control of the situation. "No one is going to prison. These are regulatory misunderstandings that our lawyers will clear up. Rachel is exaggerating the situation to drive a wedge between us, as she's always done." "The evidence isn't coming just from me," I clarified. "International intelligence agencies have been tracking these weapons. They've turned up in conflict zones where American companies are banned from selling. People have died, Father. This isn't a regulatory misunderstanding." Diana sank into one of the leather chairs, her wedding dress pooling around her. "All this time, all the times I defended you both to Rachel, and you were using me." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Was anything real? Was I ever anything more than a convenient pawn in your business dealings?" My mother rushed to her side. "Of course, darling. We love you. We only wanted what was best. What was best for your bank accounts and social standing," Diana finished bitterly. "Not what was best for me." Justin made another attempt. "Diana, I admit the initial introduction was arranged by your father. But what developed between us was real. You have to believe that." Diana looked at him with new eyes, clearer, harder eyes than I'd ever seen her use. "Did you know my name was on corporate documents for illegal arms deals?" His hesitation was damning. "Did you?" she pressed, rising from the chair. I knew your father had made you a director of certain subsidiaries. For tax purposes, he said. And you didn't think I deserved to know that my name was being used in potential felonies?" Her voice rose for the first time. "You were willing to let me walk into a marriage based on a lie, potentially facing criminal charges if things went wrong?" Justin looked desperately toward my father for help. My father sighed heavily, dropping the righteous indignation and shifting to his negotiation posture. "Rachel, what do you want? Money? A position in the firm? Whatever it is, we can discuss it like adults, without involving outside parties." I shook my head in disbelief. "This isn't the negotiation. This isn't about what I want. It's about Diana having all the facts before she ties herself legally to a criminal enterprise." I turned to my sister. "Diana, I know we've grown apart over the years. I know you've chosen their path time and again. But this time, you need to make a choice with full information. You can stay here, continue with this wedding, try to salvage what you can with Justin and our parents. Or you can walk away now, before you're further implicated in their schemes." "She's not going anywhere," my father snapped. "Diana, if you leave with her, you're cut off. Completely. No more position at the firm, no trust fund, no family support. Is that what you want? To throw away everything for some misguided loyalty to a sister who couldn't even bother to stay in touch?" Diana looked between us, the weight of 28 years of family conditioning visible in her hesitation. Justin seized the moment, dropping to one knee before her, taking her hands. "Diana, I love you. Yes, our relationship may have started because of business connections, but what we have now is real. Don't throw it away based on your sister's accusations." For a terrible moment, I thought she might believe him. Then Diana pulled her hands free and slowly removed her wedding ring. "If what we had was real," she said quietly, "you would have protected me from this. You would have told me the truth before I walked down that aisle." She placed the ring in his palm and closed his fingers around it. Then she turned to our parents. "I've spent my entire life trying to be the daughter you wanted. I followed every direction, met every expectation. And this is how you repay that loyalty? By using me as a pawn in illegal business dealings?" My mother began to cry, elegant tears that didn't disturb her makeup. "Diana, please. Everything we've done has been for this family's legacy, for your future." "A future that might include prison time?" Diana asked sharply. No, thank you. She turned to me, her expression both vulnerable and determined. What happens now? Federal agents will be moving on Meridian and Wilson investments, probably within hours, I explained. They'll want to question everyone involved, including you. But I've made it clear that you were an unwitting participant. If you cooperate fully, you should be protected from charges. Aunt Elaine stepped forward. Diana can come stay with me while this gets sorted out. Absolutely not, my father thundered. Diana, you are not leaving this building with them. Think about what you're doing. Diana straightened her shoulders, and in that moment, I saw a strength in my sister I hadn't witnessed since we were children. I am thinking clearly for perhaps the first time in years. She turned to me. Rachel, I want to leave.
Now.
Justin made one last desperate attempt, grabbing Diana's arm. You can't do this. We're married now. You have obligations. Actually, Aunt Elaine interjected with a small, satisfied smile. The marriage isn't legally binding until the license is filed, which happens tomorrow. I gently removed Justin's hand from my sister's arm. I suggest you focus on finding a good lawyer, Mr. Prescott, rather than coercing my sister. My father made a move toward us, but I stepped between him and Diana. It's over, Father. The authorities already have everything they need. The only question now is how Diana moves forward. He glared at me with a hatred I'd never seen before, not even during our worst arguments. You've destroyed this family. No, I replied quietly. You did that when you decided your wealth and influence mattered more than your daughter's well-being. Diana had moved to stand beside me, her hand finding mine and squeezing tightly, just as she used to when we were small children facing our parents' disapproval together. Let's go, she whispered. As we turned to leave, my mother called out one last time, her voice breaking. Diana, please, think about what you're giving up. Diana paused at the door, looking back at the tableau of our parents and her almost husband. The picture-perfect family arrangement that had been revealed as hollow and corrupt. I'm not giving up anything worth keeping, she said simply, and followed me out the door. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of federal agents, attorneys, and reporters. As predicted, the authorities moved quickly once I gave them the green light. Justin was taken into custody as he attempted to board a private jet to the Cayman Islands. My father surrendered himself with his attorney present, while my mother retreated to their West Hills home, refusing to speak to anyone. Diana stayed in my apartment, sleeping in my spare bedroom that first night, barely speaking as the reality of her situation sank in. I worried she might regret her decision, might blame me for destroying the life she'd built, but on the second morning, as we sat drinking coffee in silence, she finally spoke. I keep thinking about all the documents I signed without reading, she said, staring into her mug. All the meetings where I smiled and nodded while they discussed special projects in code I didn't understand. How could I have been so blind? They raised you to trust them implicitly, I replied gently. That's not your fault. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. But it was my responsibility. I'm an adult. I have a business degree. I should have asked questions. What matters is what you do now, I said. The federal prosecutor says your cooperation will be crucial in building the case. Diana nodded slowly. I'll tell them everything I know, which isn't much, but I'll try to remember every conversation, every meeting, anything that might help. True to her word, Diana spent the next week in lengthy interviews with federal investigators, providing names, dates, and details that helped fill gaps in their case. She handed over her personal devices and granted access to all her accounts without hesitation. Meanwhile, the news of the arrest sent shockwaves through Portland's business community. Wilson Investments founder arrested in illegal arms dealing investigation, screamed the headlines. Subsidiary headlines noted the dramatic scene at Diana's wedding, though thankfully most reports maintained her privacy, identifying her only as the daughter who cooperated with authorities. The media camped outside my apartment building until I arranged for Diana to stay at a military colleague's vacation property outside the city. Aunt Elaine joined her there, providing emotional support while I dealt with the professional fallout. My commanding officers were supportive but concerned about potential conflicts of interest. I was temporarily reassigned to administrative duties while an internal review confirmed I had followed proper protocols in reporting family members' illegal activities. About a week after the wedding that wasn't, Diana received the first of many calls from our mother. I sat beside her as she put the phone on speaker. "Darling, please come home," our mother pleaded, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. "The lawyers say your father could face serious charges unless we can show this was all a misunderstanding. If you just explain that you knew about the business arrangements that you approved, you want me to perjure myself?" Diana interrupted, incredulous. "I want you to help your family. Rachel has already betrayed us. Don't follow her example. Your father built everything for you, Diana. Don't you feel any loyalty?" Diana's hand trembled, but her voice remained steady. "My loyalty was used against me, Mother. I won't lie to protect people who were willing to sacrifice me." After she hung up, Diana curled into herself on the couch, sobbing as I hadn't seen her do since we were children. I held her until the tears subsided. "They'll never forgive me," she whispered. "Maybe not," I acknowledged. "But you'll forgive yourself, and that matters more." In the weeks that followed, Diana began rebuilding her life from scratch. Her assets were frozen as part of the investigation, though the prosecutor assured her that funds clearly not connected to illegal activities would eventually be released. In the meantime, she moved into my apartment permanently. I introduced her to my circle of friends, other military officers, intelligence analysts, and their partners, people whose values centered on integrity rather than social climbing. Initially shy around them, Diana gradually opened up, particularly to my friend Captain Martinez from the prosecutor's office, who took her under her wing. "Your sister is remarkably resilient," Harriet told me one evening after Diana had gone to bed. "Most people in her position would be falling apart or hiring the most expensive defense attorney to distance themselves from the case. She's doing neither. She's stronger than anyone gave her credit for," I replied, "including herself." 3 months after the wedding, the first indictments were handed down. Justin faced multiple counts of violating the Arms Export Control Act, conspiracy, money laundering, and fraud. My father was charged as a co-conspirator, with additional charges of tax evasion. Even my mother faced charges related to financial fraud, though lesser than the others. Diana received immunity in exchange for her testimony, though the psychological weight of testifying against our parents would prove heavy. The night before her first court appearance, she came into my room, reminiscent of when we were children and she'd seek refuge from nightmares. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" she asked, sitting at the foot of my bed. "I think you're doing the hard thing," I answered. "Which is usually the right thing." She nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about all the family dinners where they criticized your career choices, said you were wasting your potential. All while they were breaking the laws you were sworn to uphold. The irony isn't lost on me," I said with a wry smile. "I'm sorry I didn't defend you more," she whispered. "I was so afraid of losing their approval that I let them drive us apart. We're together now," I reminded her. "That's what matters." The media attention intensified as the trial preparations began. Diana was approached by publishers offering book deals to tell her story and by production companies interested in movie rights. She declined them all, preferring to focus on rebuilding her life away from the spotlight. With Aunt Elaine's guidance, Diana began volunteering at a veterans support organization, finding purpose in helping others who had served. The experience opened her eyes to the real-world impact of military service, and, by extension, the human cost of illegal arms dealing. "I think I finally understand why you chose the path you did," she told me one evening as we walked along the Willamette River. "It was never about rejecting the family. It was about serving something larger than yourself." 6 months after the wedding, Diana received an unexpected visit from one of Justin's colleagues who had avoided indictment. He approached her after a court session, asking to speak privately. "Justin wanted me to give you a message," he said, looking uncomfortable. "He says he really did love you in his way, that not everything was a lie." Diana considered this for a moment before responding. "Tell him I hope he finds the courage to tell the complete truth. It's the only way forward. As the criminal proceedings continued, Diana began to form a new identity separate from the Wilson name and all it had represented. She enrolled in courses at Portland State, exploring fields she'd never been allowed to consider. She cut her hair short, adopted a simpler wardrobe, and gradually shed the careful mannerisms our mother had instilled. "I'm thinking of changing my name," she told me one night over dinner. "Not legally. I'll still testify as Diana Wilson, but afterward. A fresh start." "Any ideas?" I asked. "I was thinking of using Mom's maiden name, Harrison. It still connects me to Anna Lane, but separates me from Dad's legacy. Diana Harrison. It suited her. The woman she was becoming rather than the puppet she'd been." 9 months after the wedding, my sister went on her first date since the ordeal began, with a public defender she'd met through Harriet. I helped her get ready, lending her a casual dress that was worlds away from the designer clothes she'd once worn. "What if he's only interested because of the case?" she fretted, applying minimal makeup. "I'm practically a true crime story now." "Mark works with people accused of crimes every day," I reminded her. "He's hardly a scandal chaser." She returned from the date with a tentative smile I hadn't seen in ages. "He didn't ask about the case at all," she reported with wonder. "We talked about books and hiking and his volunteer work teaching literacy in prisons." "Sounds promising," I observed. "He asked if you and I would both like to join a group hike this weekend." Her eyes sparkled. "I think he wants your approval."
Smart man, I replied, smiling.
As the 1-year mark of the ill-fated wedding approached, our parents' case moved toward resolution. My father, facing the most serious charges, accepted a plea deal that would still likely mean years in prison. My mother, claiming ignorance of the full extent of the illegal activities, negotiated a shorter sentence. The night after the plea deals were announced, Diana and I had dinner with Anna Lane at her faculty housing apartment. "I never thought it would end this way," Anna Lane said, pouring wine for us. "Frank was always ambitious, always cutting corners, but this was beyond anything I imagined." "Do you think they'll ever acknowledge what they did to Diana?" I asked. Aunt Elaine shook her head sadly. "Your parents have spent decades convincing themselves that their actions are justified. That narrative won't change easily, even with prison time." Diana, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "I don't need their acknowledgement anymore. I know the truth. That's enough." And looking at my sister, no longer the perfect Wilson daughter, but a woman finding her own path, I believed her. 1 year after the wedding that never was, I stood at attention in a ceremony at the Pentagon, receiving a commendation for integrity and service. The citation mentioned extraordinary moral courage in upholding the law even at great personal cost, a diplomatic reference to the family situation that had become something of an open secret in military intelligence circles. As the medal was pinned to my uniform, I glanced to the audience and saw Diana watching with unmistakable pride. No longer the polished society daughter our parents had crafted, my sister had transformed over the past year. Her hair was shorter, her clothes simpler but chosen with confidence, and her expression open in a way it had never been under our parents' influence. After the ceremony, Diana hugged me tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "Not just for today, but for everything. For being true to yourself all these years when I couldn't find that courage." "You found it when it mattered most," I reminded her. We walked together through the corridors of the Pentagon, where Diana now worked in a civilian role with the Veterans Affairs Liaison Office. Her business background, combined with her newfound commitment to those who served, had made her a natural fit for a position helping veterans navigate benefits and transition programs. "How does it feel?" I asked as we exited the building. "Being back in a family business of sorts, but the legitimate kind?" She smiled, the genuine smile that had become more frequent in recent months. "It feels right, like I'm using the skills they gave me, but for something that actually matters." Later that evening, we met Anna Lane for dinner at a small restaurant in Arlington. She'd taken a visiting professor position at Georgetown for the semester, partly to be closer to us during the final phases of the legal proceedings. "I spoke with Margaret yesterday," she said as we settled at our table. She's been moved to the minimum security facility. Diana tensed slightly, but nodded. How is she? Adapting in her way. She's already identified the right people to associate with. Some things never change. Aunt Elaine shook her head with a mixture of exasperation and sadness. She asked about you. What did you tell her? Diana asked quietly. The truth. That you're building a new life. That you're working with veterans. That you seem happier than I've ever seen you. Diana absently twisted the napkin in her lap. And did she say anything about that? She said she hopes you'll visit before your father's sentencing next month. Aunt Elaine reached across the table to cover Diana's hand. You don't have to, of course. I know. Diana glanced at me. What do you think, Rachel? I considered carefully before answering. I think you should do whatever brings you peace. Not what you think you should do, or what anyone else thinks you should do. Diana nodded thoughtfully. I'm not sure I'm ready, but maybe a letter first. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Aunt Elaine's students, my upcoming assignment, Diana's tentative plans to apply to graduate programs in social work. We carefully avoided mentioning Justin, who had been sentenced to 12 years after his cooperation led to indictments against higher-level executives at Meridian Defense. 2 weeks later, Diana received her first piece of mail from our mother, a response to the letter she'd finally sent. She called me immediately. She apologized, Diana said, her voice conveying her shock. Not for everything, and there was still plenty of justification, but she actually said she was sorry for putting me in that position with Justin. That's unexpected, I admitted. She also asked about you, Diana continued. Whether you might consider visiting or writing to them. I'm not there yet, I said honestly. Maybe someday, but not now. I told her as much in my letter. Diana assured me that you needed time and space, and that they needed to respect that. The following weekend, Diana organized a small gathering at her new apartment, a modest but bright space she'd recently rented with her unfrozen assets. The guests included Harriet Martinez and her husband, Mark the public defender, now officially Diana's boyfriend. Several of my military colleagues and Aunt Elaine. As I helped her prepare food in the kitchen, Diana seemed nervous. Do you think this is too normal? Too soon? People might think I'm not taking what happened seriously enough. People who matter understand that moving forward isn't the same as forgetting, I assured her. Besides, this group particularly understands complicated family situations. The gathering was warmly successful. Conversation flowing easily, laughter filling the rooms that had once seemed so empty when Diana first moved in. Watching my sister refill drinks and engage animatedly with her guests, I marveled at her resilience. The woman before me bore little resemblance to the carefully programmed daughter who had stood beside Justin at the altar a year ago. Aunt Elaine joined me by the window, following my gaze to where Diana was showing Mark photos from her recent volunteer trip with a veterans outdoor program. Your parents had it backwards, you know, she said quietly. They thought Diana was the malleable one, the one who would always follow their lead. And they thought you were the rebel who would never find her place. And instead, Diana found the strength to remake herself entirely when her world collapsed. And you knew exactly who you were all along. She smiled at me with affection. I'm proud of you both. The evening concluded with Mark suggesting we all gather at his family's cabin for Thanksgiving, a holiday that had always been a formal, appearance-focused affair in the Wilson household. Nothing fancy, he emphasized. Just good food and good company. Diana caught my eye, silently asking if I was comfortable with the plan. I nodded, genuinely warming to the idea of a holiday centered on gratitude rather than performance. The week before Thanksgiving, our father's sentencing was finalized, 8 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 5. Diana attended the hearing alone, at her own insistence. She returned to my apartment afterward, emotionally drained but oddly peaceful. He apologized to me in his statement to the court, she said, removing her sensible pumps. Another departure from the stilettos our mother had insisted were appropriate professional attire. Said he never meant to put me at risk. Do you believe him? I asked carefully. She considered the question honestly. I believe he believes it. Dad always had a remarkable ability to rewrite history in ways that preserved his self-image. But it doesn't really matter anymore whether I believe him or not. I know who I am now, and that's what counts. Thanksgiving at Mark's family cabin proved to be exactly what we all needed. A weekend of simple pleasures far removed from the Portland society circles where we'd been raised. We hiked in the crisp autumn air, helped prepare meals in the rustic kitchen, and played board games late into the evening. Diana and Mark's relationship had deepened into something solid and supportive, while I found myself enjoying conversations with his brother Thomas, another lawyer with an interest in international policy. On the drive back to the city, Diana broached a subject we'd been dancing around. I've been thinking about legally changing my name, she said, eyes on the road ahead. Not to Harrison like I mentioned before, but I wondered how you'd feel if I took Bailey, after Grandma Bailey. Our maternal grandmother had been something of a rebel herself, marrying beneath her station for love and maintaining an independent spirit that had clearly skipped a generation with our mother. I think she'd be honored, I said, genuinely touched. Diana Bailey has a good ring to it. And we'd still be sisters, even with different last names, she added, glancing at me. We were always sisters, I replied, even during the years when we were pulled apart. The holiday season brought a flurry of activity, Diana's graduate school applications, my preparation for a new assignment, and joint efforts to finalize the sale of our childhood home. Our mother had agreed to liquidate assets to pay restitution, and neither Diana nor I wanted to preserve the house that had been the setting for so much manipulation. On Christmas Eve, Diana and I hosted a small dinner for Anna Lane, Mark, and a few close friends. As we gathered around the table in my apartment, I looked at the faces illuminated by candlelight, this chosen family we'd built from the ashes of betrayal. Diana stood to offer a toast, her confidence a far cry from the nervous, people-pleasing woman she'd once been. To new beginnings, she said, raising her glass. And to the freedom that comes from facing difficult truths. A year ago, I thought my life was ending when my wedding fell apart. I couldn't imagine a future outside the path that had been laid out for me. But thanks to my sister's courage, she turned to me with shining eyes. I found something better than the life I thought I wanted. I found my authentic self. To authentic selves, Aunt Elaine echoed, raising her glass. As we clinked glasses around the table, I felt a deep sense of peace. The path to this moment had been painful, complex, and nothing like what I might have imagined when I'd walked into that wedding reception in my dress uniform a year ago. But looking at Diana, truly happy perhaps for the first time in her adult life, I knew that every difficult step had been worthwhile. Later, as our guests departed and Diana helped me clean up the kitchen, she paused, dish towel in hand. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Exposing everything? Knowing what it would cost the family?" I considered the question honestly. I regret that it caused you pain. I regret that our parents chose their ambition over their integrity, putting us all in that position. But do I regret standing up for what was right?
No.
Never. She nodded thoughtfully. I'm glad you did. Even with everything that happened afterward, I'm glad you showed up that day in your uniform with those 4 stars they couldn't ignore. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. It woke me up from a lifetime of sleepwalking. As we finished putting away the last of the dishes, Diana checked her phone and laughed softly. Mark just texted. He says his mother wants us both to join them for New Year's. Apparently, she's decided we're family now. How do you feel about that? I asked. Diana's expression softened. It feels right, like we're building something new, something honest. She looked around the apartment that had become our shared sanctuary during the most difficult year of our lives. I think this is what family is supposed to be, people who see you clearly and love you anyway, not people who use you as pawns in their own games. I hugged my sister tightly, overwhelmed by how far we'd come. From the estranged siblings we'd been, to the united front we'd become, our journey had been unexpected but ultimately healing. Happy holidays, Diana Bailey, I said, testing out her chosen name. She beamed. Happy holidays, Colonel Rachel Wilson. Here's to family, the kind we choose and the kind that chooses us. As we planned our future gatherings, holiday traditions, and the ongoing process of healing, I knew that the family we were building now, based on truth, respect, and genuine care, was stronger than anything our parents had created with their wealth and social connections. Some ties, it turned out, were more powerful than blood or obligation. The ties of choice, of integrity, and of standing together when it would have been easier to look away. I hope this story resonates with those of you who've faced difficult choices about family loyalty versus personal integrity. Have you ever had to stand up against family pressure to do what you knew was right? Or found yourself rebuilding relationships after betrayal? Share your experiences in the comments below. If my story of returning to my sister's wedding wearing those 4 stars they couldn't deny touched you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Thank you for listening to my journey from family outcast to the person who ultimately saved my sister from a life built on lies. Sometimes the most painful moments lead to the most beautiful new beginnings.